can go into bankruptcy for this. When I first started working for a startup, I knew very little about stock options and equity in terms of your compensation, how you can use it, how you can exercise it, and how it can have significant financial and tax implications. In this video, I hope to share what I've learned and hopefully make things easier to understand. I think the best thing to do is to be educated so that you don't lose money. Many people don't realize the tax implications of their stock options before it's too late. Usually they wait until they're about to leave a company or when the company has increased in value by a lot. By that time, exercising your options can cause a significant tax trigger that will be a huge financial burden for you. The goal of your equity is to hopefully invest and ride the wave of your company's growth while minimizing taxes as much as possible. Remember, we want to keep more of our money legally and not give it away to the tax man, aka Uncle Sam. What is equity compensation? Equity compensation is partial ownership in a company that aligns the interest of the individual employees with the goals of the company that they work for. Some people even take a pay cut to join a startup, hoping to take advantage of the upside from the growth of the company. But of course, the other side of that is that there's also more risk because there's no guarantee that the company will grow and be successful. Based on the numbers and the statistics, the majority of startups fail. So this is a risk that you have to take, and you have to evaluate for yourself whether or not you see potential for future growth within the startup that you join. With private companies, it's really hard to gauge what the value of that equity is. So you can really only make educated guesses about what the future value will likely be. And to be honest, it could be completely worthless in the future if the company goes under. Equity compensation is super complicated, and when I first joined a startup, I really had no idea how to value them, how to negotiate them, and really how to exercise them. And there were all these brand new terms that I never heard of before that I had to learn. And to really understand it, you need to know a little bit about corporate law, taxation, and employee compensation. So why do companies grant equity in the first place as compensation? Compensation can come in different forms. It can come in salary, equity, and benefits. I'm sure it can come in many other different forms, but these are the main ones that I can think of right now. One of the best methods to attract and attain exceptional talent is to give equity. This grants individuals partial ownership in the company, and it incentivizes them to be owners, encouraging a lot of innovation within the company. We can see this in Silicon Valley, one of the biggest tech hubs, where companies such as Facebook, Google, and HP started. For example, stock options helped the first 3,000 Facebook employees make $23 billion the first time the company went public. There's so much details that I can go into, but for the sake of this video, I will focus on stock options, which is quite standard among new startups. There are key terms that you need to know to really understand the financial and tax implications of stock options, and I'm going to run through those. These are the ones that you must know so that you can make the best financial decision for you. First off, there are different kinds of stock options. One is ISO, incentive stock options, and the second one is NSO, non-qualified stock options. I believe there are more, but again, for the sake of simplicity, I will focus on these more common ones. So incentive stock options are generally preferred among startups and have better tax implications for their employees. When you exercise incentive stock options, it is not a taxable event, except for higher earning employees, which the alternative minimum tax may apply to. So definitely look that up, AMT. It is a tax that was passed in order to tax the wealthy. With incentive stock options, you get preferred tax treatment if you hold the incentive stock option for 2 years from the date it was granted and for 1 year from the date that you exercised those options. So if you don't hold it for this minimum amount of time, the difference between your strike price and the fair market value price on the day that you exercise will be taxed at ordinary income. The other type of stock option is the NSO, which is the non-qualified stock option. It has a slightly higher tax because you have to pay employment taxes on these stock options. They're usually granted to employees, advisors, and consultants. And how these are different from incentive stock options is that you pay ordinary income tax on the day you exercise your shares. So remember, you are not a shareholder until you exercise your stock options. And exercising doesn't mean working out. Exercising means purchasing your stock options at the strike price. And usually what companies do is that they offer you a vesting schedule, so you don't get all of these stock options at once. The most common vesting schedule is to have your stock options vested over 4 years with a 1-year cliff. The cliff is how long you have to wait before you can vest any stock options at all. So that 1-year cliff is usually to incentivize employees to stay with the company for at least a year before they can get legal rights to their stock options. Then after that 1-year mark, you can vest 25% of your stock options. And then every month after that, you can vest a percentage of your options up until the end of the 4-year mark. Once your stock options have vested, you need to exercise your shares in order to be a shareholder in the company. Exercising your options means purchasing the stock options at the strike price. And the strike price is the fixed price at which you can purchase your stock options based on your stock option agreement. This strike price is usually much lower than what people expect to be the future value of the company, which is one of the benefits of being an early employee at a startup. Stock options is actually a very confusing term, and I don't know if it's just me, but I didn't really understand when I got my offer letter that I had to purchase those stocks in order to own them. So I thought the company was just giving me those shares, but really it was just giving me the option to purchase those shares. It's not free stocks. But really, nothing in life is free. You gotta work for it. Before you can exercise your options, you need to understand a few key terms that I didn't know, which are really important in terms of tax implications. There are a few things that you need to look at. One is the fair market value. The fair market value is the price at which the company will issue the stock to its employees, which is determined by the company's most recent 409A valuation. So this is what the IRS uses to determine how much tax you owe based on the equity you receive. So you actually want the 409A valuation to be low so that you can make more off of your options for a lower price. So what you get taxed on depends on the spread between your strike price and the fair market value. So if you're granted stock options at a low strike price and the spread between the strike price and the fair market value is 0, then that means that you don't get taxed anything. Then you may be able to exercise your stock options at a really good price without triggering any taxes. That's why if you're a founder or a very early employee, it would be good to exercise your options immediately to minimize your taxes and file for what they call an 83B election. This is something that I think is more beneficial for early employees and should be done when your stock options are granted. I really missed the boat here and I wasn't able to do this, but even though you can minimize your taxes later with an 83B election because you're paying taxes for all of your shares early on at the price that it was given to you, there's also the downside of if the startup goes under, you don't get any of those taxes back. So you really have to weigh things here. The more I learn about equity compensation, the financial and tax implications, the more I realize that it is a bit of a guessing game. So you do what you feel is best after being educated, but you kind of have to wait and see what will happen with your company. If you have just been granted stock options, I would definitely look to see if you're eligible for the 83B election, especially if you're part of a startup that you believe strongly in. This could be very beneficial in terms of saving you a lot of money on taxes. However, please be informed and read up everything you can on it because there are downsides to this opportunity. Also, something to be very aware of is AMT. AMT is the alternative minimum tax. This is the reason why some people who have exercised their stock options have been forced to file for bankruptcy because they weren't aware of this tax, which can hit you with a huge tax bill. I'll just touch briefly on this, but definitely read more into it because it can get very complicated. When you exercise incentive stock options, it can trigger an AMT bill even before you make money off of your shares. And this bill was passed in order to tax the wealthy who tend to get a lot of tax deductions and avoid paying a lot of taxes. So that's why it's important to understand strike price and fair market value, because if there's a big spread between the strike price and the fair market value, you can get a very big bill. It's very important to look into this. This is not financial advice, so I'm only sharing what I know, but please, please, please talk to a professional financial advisor and talk to your tax accountant. I know that was a lot of heavy information, but to be honest, I'm a little bit of a nerd and I loved researching this and figure out ways to minimize my tax bill, but also exercise my stock options to take advantage of the future growth of the startup that I work for. And I hope that I can help you do the same. So remember, we want to make more money and also keep most of the money that we work so hard for. So that is my goal for this video. There's a lot more that I can go into, so maybe I will make future videos on this topic if people are interested. Generally, the sooner you exercise, the less taxes you will pay. When you exercise your options, that's when you own it. But if you exercise your options, you cannot get your money back or the taxes that you pay, even if your company goes out of business. Most people tend to mitigate this risk by waiting until they're more sure that the company will be successful before they exercise their stock options. And most people advise for you not to exercise your shares unless you're relatively certain that your company will get acquired or IPO. Most companies take about 10 years to IPO, so you kind of have to assume that your cash will be locked up for about 5 to 10 years. And remember, with all of this, it's actually a gamble because you just don't know unless you have some sort of crystal ball and can see into the future. When you leave your company, most companies give you about 90 days to exercise your options, or you give your options back to the company. So those are my main key takeaways. I hope this video was helpful. I think what I've realized from this whole startup and equity journey of mine is that as much as you read and as much as you ask around, you will come across something that is very confusing. But it's best to stay educated so that you can make the best financial decision for you and make sure you consult with a professional to avoid any big tax surprises. One last thing I want to say is that researching and learning about equity compensation also validated one thing for me, is that it is not a zero-sums game. There's so much money and wealth and happiness and growth and prosperity for everyone out there. What happens during a startup is that shares get diluted as you bring on more investors and you have more rounds of fundraising. And when you hear this term dilution, you think that your shares will be worth less, or you'll have less of it. And it is true in a sense that the percentage of your ownership gets smaller, but in actual fact, as the company takes on more investors and fundraising, the value of the stock could actually then be worth more. So the size of the slice may get smaller, but if the company is growing, then the size of the cake gets bigger. And that literally blew my mind, because that is the epitome of abundance. Just because someone else gets more doesn't mean you get less. There is plenty for everyone. The more I get, the more you get. I hope that makes sense. I hope you found this helpful. I hope you're less confused about stock options and equity compensation at startups. Don't make the same mistakes that I did. Get educated. Know what you're going into before you are granted your stock options. Stock options can definitely be negotiated. It is beneficial to you to really understand the value of those stock options. Hope you are all doing well. I make videos on investing in your health and self to create true wealth, and I wish you all a healthy, wealthy life. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time. Bye.